Welcome back to another episode of STL Real Estate Roundtable. I'm your host, Jaden Barr, CEO and team leader of Keller Williams Realty Chesterfield. And today we're joined by a very special guest. Sam Hall. Sam, thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, so let's dive right in. I pretty much start every episode the same way because I think everybody has a very interesting journey of how they get into the real estate industry. So I'd love to learn more about yours. How'd you get into real estate?
Interesting. That's a question and conversation I have with a lot of realtors. And I feel like similarly, a lot of us will say it wasn't our first choice. We kind of found our way into real estate.
Right.
I was always very aware of real estate growing up because my grandma was a top producing realtor in Southern Illinois. So I kind of had that influence and saw her be very successful over 3 decades at it. My parents did a little bit of property investing. They were both school teachers, principals. So summers, weekends, they would work on houses and sometimes flip them, sometimes hold them as investment properties. So I had it in my blood, I guess you would say. I went to Mizzou and had a very specific career path in mind. I wanted to join the FBI and be in law enforcement, that kind of field. But through college, I ended up working on political campaigns. And so I traveled all over the country for my first 6 or 7 years out of college, working in different states and different countries, which eventually led me to working for a company that hired political people to do land use and zoning consulting.
Okay.
So imagine if you were Schnucks and you want to build a new shopping center. You would hire our firm to come in and meet with the neighbors, go door to door, talk to people about how this would impact, the local surroundings, and then work with the local elected officials, the city board, city council, to get the project approved and so on. So I did that all over the Southeast. So basically St. Louis to Dallas, St. Louis to North Carolina, and everything southeast of there. So I did that for a couple of years, enjoyed it, decided it was too much travel, had just gotten married, moved to Kirkwood, and decided to start a business. So I started a contracting firm, which went great, grew it to about 20 employees, was humming right along, doing primarily historic remodeling work, additions, whole house renovations, kitchen, bath kind of projects. And then 2008 happened. And the housing crisis.
What happened then?
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
For the young realtors that may be watching, There was a huge financial crisis that occurred, housing bubble that blew up. And I remember in the lead up to that, buying my first home, being involved in some investment properties, and the level of paperwork then versus now is insanely different. If you can believe it, people could buy houses based upon just stating on a piece of paper what their income was, no tax returns.
You sign the napkin and you have a house.
Exactly. Basically, that's what it was. And so I kept it kind of struggling along the remodeling business for a year or two, and just slowly kind of had to let employees go as the business slowed down. So it was a tough few years. In the same time frame, I got my real estate license, and when the market was really at its slowest, which was probably about late 2010, early 2011, I decided to throw myself into real estate. So I joined Laura McCarthy, which was my first brokerage.
Awesome. So, and it's just been sunshine and rainbows since then.
Yes, right. Smooth sailing ever since.
So take me through kind of the journey from, you said 2011 until today. Where are we at today?
Sure. So I started in the summer of 2011 and interviewed at a bunch of firms. It's something I recommend to any new agent is that you should at least 3. It's kind of like hiring a contractor. You should interview at least 3 and find the one that personality-wise you gel the best with and that you think you'll learn the most at. So I joined Laura McCarthy mostly because of the personality of the broker that worked there. Kathy Beeline, who's still the president of Laura McCarthy, is one of the toughest brokers I know in real estate, and I have huge respect for her. So that's where I learned a lot of the business to start. They had a very good training program. They're technically owned by Coldwell Banker, so a lot of people don't know that. The Coldwell Banker in the 90s bought Laura McCarthy to get a bigger section of the high-end business in St. Louis. They operate as a separate brokerage, but they are under that corporate banner. And so a lot of the same training that Coldwell Banker does, they have at Laura McCarthy, just maybe a little fine-tuned to the upper-end market. So started there, but very quickly met my business partner, who was a very experienced agent who had worked in North Carolina, moved home to St. Louis, and started back up here. He was looking to kind of grow a team, and he and our work ethics aligned right away, and we saw that in one another. We were at a firm that I would say was pretty old school in their philosophy of how they sell real estate. And Warner, my business partner, was one of the few people I saw that did it in a more modern, progressive way where, he's having really direct conversations with clients, marketing at that time in a more progressive way. Believe it or not, that was really before Zillow was a thing. So, it was really like pounding the pavement and marketing the old-fashioned way. So started there, and we started working together within my first year. So I would say the first few years was trial by fire of trying to still make a living doing contracting work half the time. So I would do construction Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and real estate Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. Back then, brokerages would still get a lot of phone calls, and people would do phone duty. Some brokerages still do that, but I worked so much phone duty at Laura McCarthy within my first year. They thought I was the secretary. People would call up and be like, "Oh, you're the new secretary, right?" And I would say, "No, I'm just, answering phone calls as many as I can get to try to build some business." So yeah, that's how I got started and have grown from zero business, really kind of starting over, to now I have a team of 11 agents, myself, my business partner, our assistant, and 4 agents that work full time. The rest of the team is really more referral agents. We sell on average somewhere between 65 and 75 million a year, about 100 to 120 houses a year. And I would say Warren and I personally make up about 80% of that book of business. Yeah.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
Very
so
impressive.
15 years of growth. And now we're we've not, I wouldn't say hit a plateau, but we're pretty steady at that number, which puts us in the top 5 St. Louis City countywide. And to grow to the next level, I think we would really have to increase the volume we do of transactions. And I'm not sure that we're really interested in that. So,
yeah. Awesome. Well, that's super impressive. So what do you attribute to that success? Like, what do you think the keys to the success are? You mentioned working long hours on phone duty, doing whatever it sounds like whatever it took to be successful. So like, what do you attribute that success to?
I would say, ultimately it comes down to working your butt off, right? This is an industry where...
you say that louder?
Yes. Working long, persistent hours.
Yeah.
Consistency is the key, right? If you do any kind of marketing or any kind of effort just, once, that's not enough. You've got to just really just work a narrow market to start with and grow from there. One of the things I often coach new agents on is I very early in my career found a neighborhood that I liked, that I wanted to live in, and started targeting that neighborhood and just doing postcards, doing every open house I could get in that area, hanging out in the community, being as if there was, a coffee shop, a bar, a restaurant nearby, I would frequent that place to get to know who lived there, who went to those places, the people that worked there, became friends with all the staff that worked at those coffee shops, cafes, restaurants, whatever. Just so my face was omnipresent in the neighborhood. I was strategic about it and chose a neighborhood that had a high turnover rate, and particularly a neighborhood that people would buy in first and then mature into a more expensive neighborhood nearby. Which, there are certain neighborhoods all over St. Louis that flow that way. This is the starter neighborhood to that more expensive neighborhood. And if you are new and you're starting in a neighborhood where there's a high turnover rate, people tend to stay there only like 2 to 3 years, maybe 5 at the most. That's a good book of business to start and help you grow, especially if you work hard at it, you stay in communication, and every opportunity you get, you try to beget 4 or 5 more opportunities out of that. That to me is, having gone from like no book of business in real estate to having a pretty consistent past client referral network. I would say to this day, about 80% of our business is from past client recommendations. And the most expensive, hardest business to earn is that new client that comes out of nowhere that just says, I saw your videos, or I saw something you did marketing wise. I saw your ad in this, local newspaper or whatever. That's a hard, expensive client to earn. But if you can keep a solid book of business of people who are recommending you, that's the best.
Absolutely. So you mentioned becoming the local celebrity, right?
I didn't use that term, but
yes,
the local expert,
the local expert, local celebrity in your neighborhood of the neighborhood that you're looking to get into, right?
Yes.
And then you mentioned being consistent for long. I think so many agents out there. There's one of my favorite sayings is diluted focus leads to diluted results.
Yes.
Right. So you mentioned pick a very specific target of who you want to serve, right? And Rory Vaden, I don't know if you know who Rory Vaden is, but he's all about personal branding, and he says you're most equipped to serve the person you once were.
Yes.
Right. So if you're struggling on like, who's my ideal client? Who should I be serving? Like that might be a good place to start for a lot of agents out there.
Well, ultimately, I think people always want to work with people that they can identify with, which that can be both good and bad in our industry, right? One of the things I've gotten very involved in the leadership of our community, and one of the problems we are looking to address strongly is, there's a disparate difference in the success rate of a minority realtor versus a non-minority realtor. It can be a stigma that holds back minority realtors in our marketplace, is that people want to work with people that look like them or that they can relate with. And that can be a problem when a new agent who happens to be of any kind of minority is trying to build their business. And that's a problem that we, I think, as a culture, as a business, as an industry, need to help our new agents get over. So it's something like that we're working on at the leadership at St. Louis Realtors, is to address that problem, because it is a real problem in St. Louis, which historically has, as you well know, had a lot of sort of segregation and discrimination in how our business works. But, getting back to the point, I would say if you're trying to build a book of business, looking at what you like to do, like some of my best clients have come from the fact that I like to cycle. I did it to stay in shape, and I did it because I like to hike, and I got into mountain climbing as like a hobby. I'd build my whole year. And there's a lot of podcast books about building your whole year and your whole schedule around one big challenge each year. And I do that. I follow and live by that, and have for the last about 12 years or so. So I do a big like travel trip every year. And I needed to find ways in St. Louis where there's not a lot of hills to stay in shape. So I started running, started cycling, started doing yoga. Those were all ways of building my sphere of people I knew. And I never pushed real estate, but everyone knew that I was a real estate agent. And, I'd always make sure that I had a t-shirt or a, cycling jersey that had my information on it. Right. Or would have some kind of like, ask me about real estate on the shirt. And by not being pushy, but being available and being involved and present and someone that they could relate with because of the shared interest that we had, it built my book of business. So the number one thing I would say to agents, even if you're an introverted agent, is get out and do more. Be more involved in your community, have more activities that you're involved with, and it'll build your just friend base, but B, the people that want to work with you. So that's something that I would say has paid off very well. We have some specific departments at WashU that we work with that have us show everybody they hire. And it's because randomly I was ice climbing in Colorado, and the guy next to me happened to be the dean of the business school, or one department of the business school at WashU. And that opened huge doors. And it was just because we happened to be at the same place at the same time and had that in common. So you never know.
I always say too, you're one connection away from completely changing your business.
100%.
Too, right? I mean,
100%.
You see it all the time. You have the one client that you serve, and they just become a raving fan, right? Of you and how you operate. And then they send you all of their friends, all their family, all their coworkers. And it's suddenly that one transaction turns into
100%.
So many more, right?
I mean, ultimately, I always preach that we are not salespeople. We are advocates for our clients. We are advocates. We are advisors, right? And if you're an advocate for your client, oftentimes they will turn into an advocate for you. We use this thing called the cocktail party test, that a lot of times if you're at a cocktail party, you hear people kind of talking negatively about their experience with a real estate agent or real estate in general. And we always want our clients to, at that cocktail party, say, well, that wasn't our experience. My agents did X, Y, and Z. They're fantastic. I love those guys, blah, blah, blah. So that's how we try to structure everything we do. And especially in a lot of the changes that are going on in our industry, there's been a lot of negative press about real estate and real estate agents. Now more than ever, I think it's important to show your clients that you're always putting their financial interests and their needs and wants over your own. And they can feel that whether you're conscious of it or not. Going back to the marketing, though, I thought one point, I heard this on a recent podcast, David Goggins, the author and pretty well-known podcaster, has a book that the title of the book and the theme of it is Leaders Eat Last. And I feel like whether you have a team or you're a solo agent, the idea that you eat last in our industry, in our business, is very true. The last person that should get a commission dollar is you as the agent, meaning your broker is going to take their share. If you're at a brokerage, typically that is traditional in nature. You should be paying, if you have an administrative assistant or a transaction coordinator, you're paying them first, and then you should be reinvesting in your business because ultimately you need to treat your business like it's a corporation, right? You're paying your marketing dollars first, and the net profit that you walk away with is the last thing you should be paying out. Putting money aside for taxes, all the things that make us as self-employed people operate professionally have to come off the top, and then you pay yourself last. And if you treat your business that way, and I was lucky enough to be with a business partner that didn't say that was an option. He just said, this is how we do it.
We're going to treat our business like a business.
That's
right.
Yeah. And he said to me very early on, listen, I will match you dollar for dollar on anything you want to spend in advertising. And as a new agent who wasn't making any money at the time, I was like, well, that's going to be kind of hard. But I was able to scrape together a pretty significant amount of money that first year to invest in our marketing. And ever since then, we invest a lot of money every year off of it. I'll just say at the level we operate now, we have about somewhere between $1.2 million and $1.7 million in gross profits that come in to our team. Every year we're taking about $200,000 to $300,000 of that off the top and putting that into a marketing fund and spending that on our just branding, not our individual property branding, but our team's branding. It's a lot of money in this marketplace to invest every year in advertising, but it does pay dividends, and it's what's helped us grow to the level we're at. But, it took a long journey to get to that level.
I feel like a lot of top producers out there, I see agents either want more time or more money, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, both would be great, right? Mm-hmm. But I feel like a lot of top producers, they're either hesitant to hire help. They want to put on the Superman cape and do everything themselves, right? Which is actually hurting their business. Or they simply don't have systems or processes for things, right? So what have been the most impactful systems or processes
Well, it's funny
that
you
have helped
should
your
say
business?
that, because I remember one of the pivotal moments in my career of realizing that I was going the right direction in terms of developing systems and processes and a model of doing business that I was proud of was I am friends with a great team that's at Keller Williams, Sarah Tadlock and John Brueggemann. And they used to be at our firm, and that's when I became close with them. And, they run a very tight ship as well and a very sophisticated operation. And they were saying to me, we had an assistant that we paid very generously, and we didn't refer to her as a transaction coordinator. Her job title was client concierge. Her job is to service the client's needs and basically make the process less stressful. And we are now, she is partially retired, but we won't let her fully retire because she's just too fun to have at the happy hours. So Mitzi, our assistant then, is now, just sits in sometimes on inspections and that sort of thing. We have a new, younger transaction coordinator who's fantastic and is like the perfect central casting version of the bossy secretary that keeps me in line and tells me, hey, go do this, go do that. So sometimes I feel like she's my boss, which is exactly what I need and want. So anyway.
She's the Donna to Harvey Specter.
Yes, exactly. Literally, that is my Alex Derma. Anyway, Sarah had said to me, why don't you have a nicer car? Why don't you have a Porsche? Because of the level of success that Warner and I were starting to see at that time. And I said, see her out there? That's my Porsche. And I realized at the time that metrics of success of having the nice fancy car would come because we were building something that was really starting to click. And now I own a Porsche, and I'm very proud of that. But I didn't have to sacrifice the level of service that I wanted our clients to have. But it came with time, discipline, and focus. really was about building what do we want our average sales price to be? How many transactions a year do we want to do? What do we want this team to look like? Because I'll be frank, of everyone on our team, I think only one is not a past client. So we've built our team by having a very family feeling, environment amongst our team members, where most of the people have worked with us in the past, saw how we did it, liked real estate, and we coached them into getting into it. And we don't have like the traditional model of buyer agents and then we're the listing agents. Every agent that works on our team is a full standalone agent that works with both buyers and sellers equally. We feel like that's kind of important. It's a healthy thing to be an agent that works both sides because it gives you a better perspective as a listing agent if you're working with buyers and vice versa, frankly. So we try to keep that balanced. And Warner and I have always run about 50-50 buyer to seller agency. And that's kind of how we've structured our team. But it took a long time to get there. And it really was by following the philosophy of, we eat last. We're going to lead the team. We're going to pay the agents on our team first. We're going to pay our transaction coordinators first. We're going to invest in our marketing first. And then whatever's left, we split. So that's been our model and it's worked very well.
Yeah. You said something earlier that really intrigued me. So the one big challenge a year, right? Mm-hmm. Building your whole year around that. That's Jesse Sitzler, right?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Exactly.
Okay.
Jesse takes the idea from misogi, which is this Japanese concept, right? That you, by pushing yourself into a challenge, there's also a great book out there, if you've never read it, called The Comfort Dilemma, which is basically about like we're all too comfortable in our lives today. And so you need to take on one big challenge that you're not sure whether you can complete it with the exception of being like, don't take on a challenge where you're going to possibility of dying, sure, but don't die. Because then you don't learn the lesson, So that was something that naturally I kind of came to and then found all that literature and Jesse's whole, social media, online presence, his podcasts and so on. And yes, I very much respect and like what they do. And for us in our business, which can be all encompassing, right? Your phone never stops ringing. Even when you go on vacation, oftentimes calls and emails follow you. I specifically have chosen a path where I go where there is no cell phone signal. I was one time gifted from a family member a satellite phone to take on these trips. And I said, no, thank you. Because the whole point is to not be reachable.
I realize I don't want to be reachable. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's how I structure it. And I feel like just the discipline of working towards that goal and then having to break it down into smaller goals that are accomplishable and trackable by week is a very practical skill set that then spills over into my real estate. And then setting a end of the year sales goal and working backwards and setting, weekly goals that we're working towards has been a nice parallel.
Yeah. 12-week year.
Yes, exactly right.
Good philosophy, right? Awesome. Well, you mentioned earlier your involvement in leadership and leadership roles. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about that. Share some of.
So I got involved about 5 years ago, I would say. There's a great tradition in our industry of people who get involved at the professional association level, whether that's at the national NAR level, Missouri Realtors level, or St. Louis Realtors level of kind of like the mafia. The only way out is to bring other people in, that you have to recruit in a certain number in order to be let out volunteer-wise. So Mark Levinson, who's a great agent at our office, past St. Louis Realtors president, past Missouri Realtors president, had been, quietly just kind of encouraging, pushing me to get involved. But I always felt like I was too busy. But ultimately, I felt like our industry, really grew in the number of licensed agents in our area after COVID, and everybody realized that, the sky wasn't falling, the housing economy wasn't going to implode during COVID, and that actually very cheap interest rates were driving the market up, 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 up. A lot of new licensees came into the business. And I felt like on average that affected the overall professionalism of our industry. There's a lot of agents, not necessarily young agents, but new agents who, hadn't really learned how to conduct themselves in an ethical way, in a professional way, and so on. So I got involved to help encourage that and get involved at the association. So it just kind of grew from one thing to the next. And I have been involved in sort of the tech startup community in St. Louis over the years and nationally to some extent. And I saw this coming from conferences that I would go to, the lawsuits that made their way through Kansas City that challenged the traditional way of paying commissions were no surprise to me because there had for a long time been conversations of people in the tech world and the venture capital world, startup community, about how they could get more into what we did. And the terminology that would be used at these conferences, which were not real estate conferences, they were more like tech conferences, was like, how do we address the human problem? And what they meant by the human problem was us, realtors.
That's
right?
us.
Yes. The inefficiency by their definition was people, that if we could just eliminate people and let consumers through websites, search portals, look at property online, request to go see it without a human being present, just by having a remote access platform where you could go and you as a buyer could just like type in a code at the front door or walk in, tour yourself, go home, almost like doing your taxes through TurboTax or buying a car through Carvana, then go onto their website, fill out a contract and submit it directly, negotiate through a chatbot with the seller, and then boom, Bob's your uncle, and now you've closed on a house without ever having to actually deal with a human being or an agent more particularly. That would be the most efficient way to buy and sell real estate in the United States. Obviously that ignores all the complications and pitfalls that come along with a system like that. But that's the like big billion-dollar question these companies wanted to try to solve. And the big encumbrance was how commissions had always been paid out between selling agent, seller, and buyer broker and their client. So they had to break that up. And the way to break it up was to sue. The fastest way to break it up was to sue. And they were successful. And so it has changed our industry. It has opened the possibility that, and the CEO of Zillow has been out on all the financial shows really hyping up that this has unlocked the door for them to sell real estate this way. Now, in my opinion, I don't think consumers, the average home buyer, home seller, is that dumb. I think they're going to appreciate the services that we provide as professionals and realize that maybe they don't want to just buy a house that's different than a car without ever having dealt with a professional to transact that process, someone who really knows the ins and outs of the process. Because you can probably recover financially from a bad car purchase, but can you recover, or how long is it going to take you? How many decades is it going to take you to financially recover if you buy a house that's just unsellable or that has such defects that weren't disclosed to you and there's no recourse because of the way you purchased it? How long is it going to take you or most people to recover from that? It's a different process. So in my estimation of it, I don't think that it's kind of like the iBuyers. Everybody was so concerned about these iBuyer companies that came into town and we're just going to buy up all the properties and then sit on them for a few months, turn around and sell them for a profit. Well, if anybody knows about how St. Louis real estate goes and appreciation levels, that was never going to work here. And now all the iBuyers are gone from St. Louis. They can still operate in some communities, but that was a business model that really never had legs. Just like I don't think that this idea of like selling billions of dollars of real estate across the United States in this remote way is ever really going to stick. But they've changed our industry overnight. So I do think my involvement at the association is why I chose to run for president last year. So I'll be president in 2026 was because of my concern about what effect that's going to have on our industry and the fact that there's still like 40 lawsuits working their way through federal and state court that are challenging our industry from all different angles. So I think it's an interesting time to be in our business, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, congratulations on the role.
Thanks.
Awesome.
I appreciate it.
Let's talk about, some of the challenges associated with building a business of your size and a team of your size. Like, what are some of the challenges that you're either currently working through or have worked through in the past that you feel like other agents watching this might benefit from?
Sure. I would say the challenge we hit up against now, most of all, is that, the sincerest form of flattery is imitation. And frankly, there's probably nothing we've done marketing-wise that was original. I mean, occasionally I'll think, oh, this is really great and this is a unique, novel idea, but probably someone's done it in another marketplace. So I would say, we were some of the first agents in St. Louis to start doing like agent-guided video tours of our properties. And now it's pretty pervasive. We did it because we saw agents. We started by first doing lifestyle where my business partner and I, family members, whatever, would appear in the video. So there was just like a life in the property. where like one of my favorite was we were promoting this really nice townhouse that had a nice backyard, and we had kids running around in the backyard playing soccer. We had someone in the kitchen, like they were making dinner, and it just flowed through the video. There was no narration. It was all just like music. But it made the house and property feel alive.
Alive. Yeah.
So doing unique video marketing content used to be a very novel thing that we did. Now it's much more pervasive. Now it's kind of the expectation of the seller. It's not a value add anymore, really. So it's always finding that new way to be innovative and kind of cutting edge that makes us unique in the eyes of a seller who might hire us, without being kitschy, right? I'm never going to be an agent who dances on TikTok, right? But how do we show, like one thing that I've struggled with and I'm trying this year to really show this is my construction background is a value add to my clients, that every time I work with someone, they're like, I mean, if everyone knew that how knowledgeable you are about that, everyone would want to work with you. I was like, well, how do I really like promote that? So like using social media as a platform to promote that. So far, I've been kind of mixing content back and forth between my personal and professional pages on Instagram to show that knowledge without like being too over the top about it, and not becoming like a page that's just about like home improvement, keeping the focus on real estate, but showing that enough to make people be like, oh, you do that. So that's kind of a unique thing, I think, for any agent. That's like, if you're new, it's finding like something you can do with consistency, right? What can you do, whether on Instagram or through direct mail or through local publications, or just through like old school like networking by going to community events, being involved in your local chamber, whatever, B2B, business to business, peer networks, whatever you can do in that regard with consistency and be effective at is what you should focus on first, and then grow from there. Too many people are trying to be Instagram famous and not building a solid book of business. So it's about using those platforms. Like, we all fake it until we make it, right? So if you're new and you're starting out, using other people's, with permission, properties and listings to promote on your Instagram is something you should do. There's lots of ways at how you can approach that, and good listing agents won't mind, especially if you tag them. So how do you go about that? How do you make it interesting to, as you said earlier, people that are relatable to you, who are going to see it, like it, and want to work with you? It's all real estate is aspirational. I would say we have chosen, we're upper end agents typically. Our average sales price has always hovered, well, at least for the last 5 years, around $750,000. But there's a lot of agents we work with who only sell over $1 million, right? But their business fluctuates up and down significantly because that upper end in St. Louis is very volatile. We have always found that by keeping our average sales price under $1 million, we have a nice book of steady flow of business of everything from properties that are, a couple $100,000 to a couple $1 million, because that's a more consistent book of business in St. Louis than only working upper end. But ultimately, it's about finding a set of marketing tasks that you can do weekly with consistency to really get your name out there to people who want to work with you, and they might ultimately not be buying and selling houses that are at the expense level that you would like, but you're going to grow with those people. And ultimately, one client becomes the referral source to another. I can't tell you how many times we've worked and given great service to someone who's junior, to someone we then get referred to who's like the president or manager of wherever they work. And they're like, hey, that person wouldn't stop talking about what a great job you did for them. And they, you got a house that's in the neighborhood we were trying to find our kids in, and we couldn't like find them a house.
Right.
So, I would say those kind of things are the difference makers.
And you've kind of touched on it several times, not directly, but indirectly, of making lead generation fun,
Yes.
right? Getting involved in your community, getting involved in groups that you're already involved in anyway. How can you just become the real estate expert in that group, right?
I mean, I've not been a fan of paying for leads my entire career. Sometimes you have to do it. Some teams do it just to feed younger agents on their team. But I would say I've paid for leads from every service known to man. And not a single one of those paid leads was ever as valuable as the organic leads that I would get through expanding the sphere of people I knew in St. Louis. A qualified lead that you get organically is 10 times more valuable than a qualified lead.
Profitable.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So right now, operating at even, the level we do not pay for leads from any service. Now, we're at a brokerage, and it's expensive to be at the brokerage we're at. We're at Beelman Sotheby's. Sotheby's is an international brokerage that is owned by Anywhere, what used to be Realogy, that also owns like Corcoran, Coldwell Banker. It's a big parent company to a lot of real estate brokerages. And they tend to get the upper end referral business, like business transfer business, that goes through that sort of Coldwell Banker, Sotheby's, Corcoran, sphere or world. So part of the reason we're at a brokerage like that, you guys have great referral or relocation business and referral stuff. There's a value to that as an agent, right? And a lot of top producing agents will say, I don't want to work that. There's a referral fee on it. And they'll ignore that business. But we find that's a great door opener to a lot of firms, where we go in, we prove ourselves, and then all of a sudden we become someone that they specifically request. So we don't shut our door to that kind of business at all, and think that it can be a nice gap filler to times when business can get a little slow. If Warner and I don't have the time to work it, we'll sometimes pass it on to the other agents on our team who are very grateful to work that. So I would say no matter how successful you get, you can't ever turn away business. Yeah. I'm thankfully at a point in my career, and you should all hope to reach this point of your career where you can maybe not take the crazy client that you maybe did it at the beginning of your career.
Some of the best deals you ever do are the ones you don't.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Okay, a few more questions here as we wrap up. So as you look at the business that you've built, what are you most proud of?
I would say I'm most proud of the idea. Like if you ask someone who's worked with us, like what was it like working with them? People will first jokingly say, well, Sam and Warner are two very different personalities, and we loved working with both of them. And we typically work everything together, 50-50. We're very different people. He's much my senior in both the career and age to some degree. So Warner is at a stage of his career where he travels a significant part of the year, but is still very involved even while traveling. So he works remotely on a lot of our deals while he's traveling. But he still weighs in a way that our clients really love, because he's, I wouldn't say more direct, but he's more colorful in his directness. He kind of, one client described it as he's the hand grenade and I'm the broom. Sometimes, he's the good cop, I'm the bad cop, or vice versa. But our approaches are very different. I'm the level one. He's the one that tends to get clients fired up or, emotional about a purchase, which can sometimes be very good. Sometimes people need to be shown the emotion in a place that they're about to live. So that process I'm very proud of, that we have found a way to work together over 15 years. That's a long partnership.
Yeah.
Especially a long partnership of two people that aren't related and aren't married, right?
Mm-hmm.
Warner's gay, I'm straight. We're best friends, but we didn't know each other before we started working together, so that friendship is hard earned. So I'm proud of our relationship and how we turn that and deliver that to clients in a way that they find adds value to the transaction, and makes the transaction, what can be a very stressful process of moving, nobody really likes moving, can make it fun and easier, less stressful. And I'm also very proud that people will typically describe us as experts, and that we had always had their interests at heart. That especially in this day and age, taking the fiduciary duty you have as an agent very seriously and putting that first. I can't tell you how many people come to us because they were kind of creeped out by an agent they felt like was all about the money. The money will come if you have other people's interests in mind. So I would say that's what I'm most proud of, is having built a whole team that the culture conducts itself that way.
And has that same level of service, same standard that you have.
That's right.
Okay, last question. So what's been the most impactful book or podcast that has impacted the way you do business or life in general?
I would say if I'm really being specific, I mean, I could give you a laundry list of books I like to read, and I read a lot of nonfiction. I mean, I read fiction too, but I'm working on a book. I love to read books about our industry. The book I'm working on is called The Ethical Agent. It's about like how to be an ethical agent in our industry, especially in today's day and age. But the book that I would say, the two books that have impacted me the most that are specific to our industry is Ryan Serhant's first book. He's kind of, he was on Selling New York or whatever that show was.
His first one, Sell It Like Sirhan?
Yes.
Okay.
And I would say that I felt like it had very practical daily discipline kind of things to do. He uses a term in it, follow up, follow through, and follow back. The follow back part was a thought process that I did naturally, but I never heard it coined that specifically, where it's basically like, yes, people expect a real estate agent to follow up and follow through on what they say they're going to do, but following back up with consistency to like show that you care about a client after closing, or if there's lingering things from a transaction, that you're on top of it, and that you're following up with them to say like, hey, I know when you bought that house, you were a little worried about the commute. How's the commute going? You never know when a conversation like that is going to turn into, well, actually, I'm so sick of this commute. I want to move. Can we start looking at properties together? There's an AR study that I saw one time that showed that it's like an astronomically high number of real estate agents never follow back up with past clients enough that something like 40% of realtors lose a client after the first sale, that they don't come back to their original agent. And that's an insane number in my mind. So keeping that focus, I think, is best. So that was a good book. It's become a big consulting service now, but I would say Ninja Selling is a great book on how to be like practical and strategic about growing your book of business. So those couple books, I mean, I've read every one of Gary Keller's books. I think especially for any agent that has not ridden a cycle of down, you should go back and read his book called
Shift.
Thank you. Shift, if you haven't been through a market transition, is an important book for anyone to read, to be prepared. So those are books specific to our industry, but I would certainly say the book I referenced earlier about the comfort crisis, I think is the name of the book. He was just recently on the Huberman Lab podcast. If you listen to that podcast, it's a great podcast. It can be a little scientifically dense, but the author of that book was just on there, and he does similar things to what I do in terms of long scale through hikes and mountain climbs. So go listen to that podcast. It was very good, and he's specific about some of the books he's written. But that book really helped shake me out of like, what do I do on a daily basis? About all of those books point to making, the first thing you do in the day, the most difficult thing you have to do all day. So if there are clients that you're really not looking forward to making a call, make that call first thing. That is one thing that I've really adopted as a daily discipline that has changed my life for the better. Just like today, I knew I was coming to meet with you, so I did everything that I was not looking forward to first so that I could come do this, have fun, and then the afternoon could be coasting.
Well, Sam, you built an amazing business. I've been watching your business in social media from afar for a while now, but it's been so great to get to know more about your journey through real estate and goals going forward. And
this was fun.
Had a blast, and I know everybody watching is going to get a ton of value from this episode. So
Awesome.
Appreciate you coming on.
Well, thanks, Shane. I really appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. We'll see you in the next episode.